Welcome to the menu on Native America Calling. I'm Andi Murphy. In just a few years, Dawn Butterfly Café grew out of its tiny spot in Taos Pueblo to an extension that Taos Pueblo chef and owner C.J. Bernal helped build from the ground up. In the Northwest, a plant with an edible bulb is a traditional food staple. Once plentiful, camas is now a food some tribes are working to protect and restore. And we'll talk to the originators of the Indigenous food pyramid. We're back after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Jill Freitas. Former Democratic Alaska Congresswoman Mary Peltola visited Petersburg earlier this week in her campaign to unseat incumbent U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan. Peltola addressed a group of more than 50 people at Petersburg's Alaska Native Brotherhood John Hanson Senior Hall as part of a one-hour meet and greet. She encouraged residents to get out and vote this year.
So many of the things that we are working on in Alaska just become political footballs for people in the lower 48 or some administration. And we're better than that. We're bigger than that. We are going to put our foot down and not be used as a political football.
During her speech, Peltola emphasized supporting elders, children, and addressing affordability. Peltola's campaign told KFSK she was not available for questions from local media during her visit. Local Assembly member James Valentine says Peltola made time to talk to local leaders about a wide range of issues before the event. Valentine says he spoke with her about outmigration in the region.
Me, as a younger Assembly member and a young, community leader, I asked her, and just more of stating just my concerns about the younger generation retention in Southeast Alaska. And she's from Western Alaska, and I know she feels the same way.
That same day, Peltola also hosted a meet and greet in Wrangell on a neighboring island. This week, she visited other Southeast Alaska communities, including Ketchikan, Sitka, and will be in Haines Friday. The Senate primary takes place in August, and the general election is in November. This story was provided by KFSK's Taylor Heckart. The thick winter ice of the Yukon River has washed out to the Bering Sea, signaling the end of breakup season on the Yukon Delta. Last week, communities along the Yukon River experienced ice jam-related flooding. For some, it was among the most severe breakup impacts in recent memory. The communities of Holy Cross and Pilot Station saw water enter homes and in some cases cover airport runways. But as of Tuesday evening, significant ice jams close to the mouth of the Yukon gave way and the water began to recede. Mike Ottenweller is a meteorologist with the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. He's been a part of the River Watch team doing daily aerial surveys, tracking the Yukon River's breakup.
We watched the very last little bit of the ice run that was at one point 40 miles long, and maybe even if you go back a couple weeks, 90 miles long at some points. But we watched that clear out to the coastal areas and past those last villages and making its way out to the Bering Sea.
Overall, he says this year's Yukon River breakup trended toward dynamic and was about 5 days later than average, which was expected coming out of this year's frigid winter. Laura Havameister with the State Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management says though the flooding is receding, the recovery process is still ongoing. She points to Alukkanuk, which experienced flooding on some roadways.
We could not make it into town, unfortunately, just because of that flooding. So we're working with the city manager and with the SAR team to really understand those inundation areas.
From shuttling the team from the airstrip to providing on-the-ground updates, Havameister says the state says the community aspect of the operation is a powerful one. The team concluded their aerial surveys for the 2026 Yukon River breakup on Tuesday. This story was provided by KYUK's Samantha Watson. I'm Jill Freitas.
National Native News is produced by Kawanak Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Support for law and justice-related programming provided by Hobbs, Strauss, Dean & Walker, LLP, a national law firm dedicated to promoting and defending tribal rights for over 40 years. More information available at hobbsstrauss.com.
Hear that? Tribal college faculty do so much, one can't say it all here. Nothing but respect. Visit mostthoroughdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is the menu on Native America Calling, our regular special feature on Indigenous food news and stories. I'm your host and producer, Andi Murphy. Camas plants are topped with purple flowers around this time of year, and that means their bulbs are ready for harvest. Once an important staple for tribes, mainly in the Northwest and West, camas harvesting and cooking today is a traditional activity tied to cultural revitalization and environmental restoration. We'll learn about camas harvesting and preservation a little later in the hour. Also, the people behind a new reporting project created an Indigenous food pyramid, a Native interpretation of the federal government's dietary guidelines. We'll hear from a journalist with the Cultivating Culture initiative focused on the impact of food and language on tribal sovereignty. But first, Dawn Butterfly Café just opened its doors in Taos Pueblo. The eatery is owned by chef and entrepreneur CJ Bernal, and the new venture is an extension of a small espresso bar he started back in 2022, and it pays homage to his sister's memory. You can join our discussions today if you give us a call at 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us now from Taos Pueblo is CJ Bernal. He's the chef and owner of Dawn Butterfly Café. He's Taos Pueblo and Squay First Nation. Welcome to the menu, CJ.
Hi, how are you today?
Doing pretty good. I'm glad you could join us and take a little bit of time from your busy schedule there. I know this is a little bit in that busy hour of the lunch hour, so thank you for joining us. I want to ask about your venture. It started back in 2022 as a small espresso bar. When did you know that it was time to expand?
So we started the espresso bar within the historic Pueblo, and we did really good business our first year, but it always has been our goal to expand into food and a full service restaurant. So. I think it was like that first year, was when I made that decision to actually embark on that endeavor of building a new restaurant, and having the intention of it being on our tribal lands of Taos Pueblo was really clarified for me when I looked at economic development in our community, and, to bring the economic development back to our tribe was a very, I guess it was a strong feeling for me that I had to do that. So I wanted to build the restaurant here on our land. So, yeah, we started building it a year and a half ago, and we're still working on it. But it is it's pretty much completed at this point and open.
Right. And you guys have to build from pretty much the ground up. I mean, I've been watching you guys' process for the last, year and a half, like you mentioned. Can you talk about the building process? What is the restaurant made out of?
So the building is built out of 6 shipping containers. They're 40-foot high cubes. And it's 2 stories. It spans about 2,300 square feet. So we have a downstairs, which is our kitchen, and our kind of more cafe and counter area. And then we also have an upstairs. And we built a sub room in between the 2 containers on the top. So it's a full dining space. We can seat about 60 people inside the building.
All right. And
and it's been a very long, complicated process. As all of us know, projects this big are really long and tedious process. But I've had to jump through a lot of hoops and figure out a lot of different challenges in this process. And it's the first time anyone has done this. An individual from our tribe has done this kind of a massive operation and did it on their own, So I'm very grateful for my family, my brother Quantlin and my father Carpio and my mom Rose. And all of our staff and team, they've been here this whole time. And, we all put our hearts and, souls and sweat and tears and blood into this build. So, we're very honored and happy to have gotten this far with it. And, it's a lot of people from our tribe are very excited. A lot of them are coming through to visit. And a lot of the people here at Taos Pueblo, they just can't believe we were able to pull this off.
Right.
And so, there's a lot of excitement, and a lot of people are inspired by what we did here. So it's been very nice to see all the locals starting to come through. The last 2 weeks we've been open. So as far as the building itself goes, we went through a lot of complications with it. It took a lot longer than I had anticipated it taking. And, there was some things that we had gone through, difficulties we had gone through. But the building was built by by our community of Taos Pueblo. So I had been working with a contractor and a building group for the original foundation, and they weren't from Taos Pueblo, but we had a lot of difficulties. So I ended our working relationship after they finished the foundation, and I decided from that point that I only wanted to hire our people from Taos Pueblo to continue working on the building and getting it done. Okay. So we had a lot of skilled laborers who were contracted, who work for here at the Pueblo and are from the Pueblo come through. We had a lot of general laborers that we had hired, young people from the Pueblo, come in and just learn, like my dad, Carpio, I brought him on as like a general job site overseer and contractor, and he's got a history of working in construction when he was younger. And, a lot of these people we brought in, young people from the tribe, they were able to learn skill sets in the process of doing this. So, I felt very honored and that we were able to do it this way, as opposed to going out and hiring, a contractor from somewhere else. And,
right.
It took a lot more energy and a lot more effort, and it was a little bit of a slower process, but in the end, it was the right way to do it. So,
okay. And I
Yeah,
want to, I wanted to, focus a little more on the food part here. I mean, you've been open for a couple of weeks, and but I know you've been cooking in kitchens all across the country. What knowledge from those past experiences show up in what you're doing now on the menu right now?
I would say like what we do here right now is we do fusion of native New Mexican ingredients, things that were traditional ingredients for our people, and then I integrate, some Western ingredients, healthy things into our menu. Because if I could be a full-time farmer, I would. But I'm busy running all of this. So, we do fusion food. We like to highlight the traditional ingredients into the dishes. And so, like, one of them is a modern kind of twist on a Three Sisters bowl, which we do the squash in the actual bowl or the squash shell, and then we stuff it with all these different things, the corn and the beans, and then we add kind of a modern twist on it by putting like some goat cheese in, or a choke cherry sauce, or microgreens and tomatoes. We'll do different versions of it. But everything has kind of this fusion integrated into the dishes. So we like to use a lot of blue corn, choke cherry, squash, some of the wild herbs that grow here in Taos. And, I use like those ingredients in any way I possibly can, whether it's dehydrating and using them in drinks, or, growing the teas on site here, or making reductions or sauces out of them. It's really, for me, about playing with our native ingredients and highlighting them in as many ways as I possibly can.
All right. Well, CJ, I want to come back to you right after this break. But for folks who are listening, we are talking to CJ Bernal. He is the owner and chef of Dawn Butterfly Café in Taos, New Mexico. We'll be right back after this break.
Alaska Fish and Game agents are aiming to shoot an unlimited number of brown and black bears in southwest Alaska. The program covers a 40,000 square mile zone and is intended to protect declining caribou herds. It's receiving a mixed response from stakeholders. We'll learn more about bear management in Alaska on the next Native America Calling.
Support by the American Indian College Fund. The American Indian College Fund provides millions of dollars of scholarships to thousands of Native students every year. Tribal citizens of every age and experience are eligible. The deadline for applications is May 31st, and you can find everything you need to apply at collegefund.org. That's collegefund.org, or by phone at 800-766-FUND. Education is the answer.
Thank you for tuning in to the menu on Native America Calling, our special feature on Indigenous food news and stories. I'm Andi Murphy, and I want to bring back our guest from Taos Pueblo, CJ Bernal. CJ is the owner and chef of Dawn Butterfly Café. CJ, you started Dawn Butterfly back in 2022, and that was shortly after your sister died. Can you tell us about how that tragedy and how that grief turned into inspiration for you and your family to start Dawn Butterfly?
Yes, well, first of all, it's a very long and complicated story, but, Coral, my sister Coral Bernal, we lost her unexpectedly in 2020, and we had gone through a 2-year legal process of trying to get justice for her and accountability through federal courts. Our goal is to get to a court hearing, and her case involved medical negligence upon the Indian Health Services. However, it's a very lengthy and complicated journey that you have to go through, and we were not able to get to federal court, but we made the decision as a family that we wanted to do something to honor her and something positive. And we wanted to move forward in the best way that we possibly could, which was to be able to become creative again as a family. And, grieving is a very hard thing to go through. And the way we've always done that as a family is to create work, to create art, to delve and ingrain ourselves into what we do, which is art. And, for me personally is food. And I've got a long, extensive history in working in restaurants, and I've always loved to cook. But for us, it was to look at something bigger and greater, which this is the second step in that. The main goal for us as a family is to create an art center dedicated to healing through artwork. And so there's a 3-step process involved, and one was to start the cafe at the historic village. The second one was to open a restaurant, and then our third step in this process as a family is that our long goal or hope for these two businesses is that they can create a revenue stream to fund the building of the art center, which will be called the Coral Dawn Bernal Center for Arts and Literature. She was a renowned poet and very prolific writer here in Taos. And so for us, it was really about, going through metamorphosis and going through a transition as a family of working through our grief in the best way that we could, and stepping away from illegal action of things and going into more positive and creative creation for our community. And so, it's been a very emotional few years for us, but we're all, doing the best we can to honor her in the best way that we can. And one is to create a space where people can gather and eat food and, listen to music or poetry or, have events here, and to eat healthy food and make it affordable for our community and also the visitors, and to, like, what we've integrated into our business as a restaurant is a workforce training model. So we're able to hire the young youth of the Pueblo or anyone really, and educate them not only about the food and the culinary side of things, but also about just the work environment. Like, I feel like as somebody who's always worked in restaurants, it's something I keep close to my heart and as a person. And it's a very humbling industry, and so, it teaches young people a lot of life skills, and they get to carry that with them wherever they go off to in their lives. So, and then they get that, that work history. So, it's been a very positive thing for us. And I, know that Coral's here in heart, and, we're just looking forward to our next step of this restaurant getting off the ground and creating that revenue stream for us to start building that art center.
All right. Well, thank you so much, CJ. That sounds like a really awesome project that your family started, and thank you again for joining us and sharing about that journey. Links to the Dawn Butterfly Cafe, to all of our guests on our shows, are on our website, NativeAmericaCalling.com. If you'd like to learn more about the guests and what they're talking about, where they're coming from, you can go to our website there. So I want to move on and go to a different discussion now, because it's camas season, and in some parts of the country, that means folks are out harvesting and cooking them. The wild purple-flowered plant has an onion-like bulb, and it readily grows mainly in the west and northwest. But environmental changes and land boundaries now make it hard for native harvesters to find them sometimes. So if you want to join our conversation about camas, you can give us a call at 1-800-996-2848. That's 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us now from the Grand Ronde Reservation in Oregon is Jordan Mercier. He's the Cultural Education Coordinator for the Chalu Museum and Cultural Center. He's also a member of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. Welcome to the menu, Jordan.
Masi, Slush Chisan, the Slachayim, Andi, Kanawiyuk, Shawash, Ilitilakam. Thank you. Good morning, Andi, and it's good to be here.
Awesome. It's good to have you on. I want to ask you about camas. Where does it grow in your community, and what else is it called?
Well, it grows all over the Willamette Valley in western Oregon, and also just all over the Northwest. Here in Grand Ronde on our reservation, you see it pretty much everywhere in all the fields. It likes to grow open prairies, and especially areas that have been inundated with water in the winter and then dry up. It really likes that area too.
All right. And what does harvesting it entail?
You also mentioned, you asked me what else is it called. We also call it la camas, which is in our language that we speak here, Chinookwawa. And we have many other languages that come from our reservation, but that's the one that we speak today. And then we have a lot of other names for it in our Kalapuya, Molalla, Chinook, Takelma, Cow Creek, Umpqua, lots of different languages here, but so we call it la camas. And for harvesting, we go out, and this time of year it's raining and it's sunny, kind of mixed, day to day here. So after a rain, especially, the ground's nice and soft, and there's many ways to harvest. If it's a good patch like we have here on the reservation, you can just take one of our digging sticks. We call them a mequi. People also call them cuppins. It's basically a hardwood stick out of a yew wood or some hardwood with a handle on it. And traditionally we put like a deer or an elk antler on there as a handle. And then you just find a flower, go next to it, and push that stick down, a few inches into the ground, and then pop that bulb out. And then if it's a harder ground, some people use shovels too. But yeah, like I said, if it's a good field that's been taken care of, it shouldn't be too hard.
Right. Before the show today, we were talking about this, and you mentioned a couple of acres of land back. The tribe was focusing on. Can you talk about that couple of acres and what you learned about it over the last couple of years?
Right. So, due to private land ownership and agricultural activity throughout our homelands, it's pretty limited, our access to good camas fields. And so over the past decade or so, there was a family here in Grand Ronde that had their property right off the highway. And every year I'd drive by about this time, and you'd see the camas in their fields so thick that it almost looked like a lake, and just looking over there all jealous, and wishing that we had it. And but eventually, someone from our natural resources department made contact with them, and they weren't tribal. They're just a non-native family that lived here, and they made contact with our natural resources department and negotiated a deal, and we were able to actually get that land back. And it's part of our traditional reservation that, like most tribes' history, our land got stolen and sold off, and so we were able to get that land back. And for the past several years, our natural resources department's been able to go out there and do traditional burning. Fire is a big tool that we've always used here, to manage our lands and enhance our foods and our plants. So they've actually been able to burn that field the last few years, and we're seeing really good results. And personally, I've been digging camas for a long time, and I've never dug in a field so nice and so easy. And most people think, from my community anyway, that camas digging is extremely hard work and takes a long time, which was true because before we had this field, you pretty much have to drive out to our closest co-managed land with the Forest Service, about 3-hour drive, and you get there and it's all like mixed in with grass and stuff, so that really hard to dig in. And so it would take a lot of digging and a lot of work to get just a small amount. And what I'm finding now is I can go out there and get enough for pretty much a week, in about 45 minutes. And then now my family's eating it all the time. We're able to snack on it when we're watching movies, take it on road trips to powwows and stuff, and just it's a really awesome food to have because it fills you up in a really good way and feels good to eat.
Mm-hmm. Tell us what it tastes like, and then tell us about the cooking process.
Sure. It's a really unique flavor, but you can compare it to dates or like cooked figs. I'd say more like a date, though. It's got a really good sweetness to it, and it actually surprises people when they eat it because it tastes like you added sugar to it. But you can just cook it on its own, no added ingredients, and it caramelizes over a long period of time in the slow cooking process. And so what you end up with is soft, kind of like a sweet potato. And depending on how you cook it, some people, it turns out a little more soft, and you can also dehydrate it too and make it more of a chewy, kind of like a fruit snack almost. It's really versatile, but if you cook it properly, which is the key, you'll end up with a really awesome food that you can mix and mash it up with other traditional foods like hazelnuts or tarweed seeds, different kinds of berries and stuff, and then you can dry that for later, and it turns into almost like a power bar or granola bar, and then it'll be good for a long time. Like the shelf life is extremely long. So the cooking process, though, is really low and slow, and there's a lot of different ways people do this. Traditionally, in my family, we had earth ovens that we would dig pits in the ground and put hot rocks in there and put a lot of leaves and stuff and bury it for a few days, usually 3 to 5 days. And those teachings come from my grandpa, John B. Mose Hudson, and so a lot of our teachings were kept by him even through our termination and relocation and kind of decimation of our community. He was one of the pillars that really was able to hold on to that knowledge and pass it down to us that we have today. But me personally, my favorite way of cooking it is in my oven in my house, and I set it to real low temperature, like 200 degrees, and I'll just leave it in there for 2 days or so, 30 to 40 hours, and depending on the air and depending on the camas and all the different factors that I'm not really even aware of, honestly, I just know when it's done when I eat it. I taste it and make sure it's tasting good, and then that's when it's done.
All right. All right. And I hear the tribe has a nursery, and it does include camas. Is that part of the tribe's sort of restoration work?
Yeah, it's a really big part of our push right now to heal our land and our people. And what they do up there at the nursery is they grow these beds of camas, and they're just packed with thousands and thousands of bulbs. And then they'll use those bulbs to do outplanting activities with our community. So there's several sites throughout our homelands in Western Oregon where we're restoring traditional lands, and some of those are state parks, some of those are conservation easements with the federal government, some of them are through nonprofits, and basically we'll use our camas that we're cultivating to bring to their sites, and then we'll plant it with a long-term plan of those lands eventually being healed enough and restored enough to be gathering locations. Because, our community is spread out throughout Western Oregon. We have about 1,000 of our tribal members living here on the reservation, but, we've got another, 1,500. I don't know the number exactly, but they're out in Portland and Salem, Eugene, and Medford, Oregon. So, it's kind of creating those spaces all over for people to be able to access.
Awesome. All right. All right. Well, we are talking with John Mercier from the
Jordan.
Jordan Mercier. I'm sorry about that. From the Chichelu Museum and Cultural Center. He's been working for a long time to take folks out to learn about camas, help harvest, and forward those teachings in the community. So we'll be back right after this break. You are listening to The Menu on Native America Calling.
Tribal Development Partners, helping tribes build toward their goals through 105L leasing and essential facility development, empowering sovereignty, strengthening community. More at tribaldevpartners.com, proud supporters of this show.
Ready to expand your reach and inspire change? Kaufman & Associates crafts culturally grounded communication strategies for Native audiences. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
We're glad you're with us today on The Menu on Native America Calling. It's our special feature on Indigenous food sovereignty, and I'm Andi Murphy. I want to continue with our guest, Jordan Mercier from the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, to talk about camas, and then after that we'll move on to our topic about the Indigenous food pyramid. Jordan, the process for harvesting and cooking camas, 2 to 3 days of low and slow cooking. Does the fact of, just how difficult it is, affect how people in the community are willing to engage in this traditional food activity?
Yeah, I think it has been a barrier. There's several things, that I think kind of get in the way of people being able to engage with it. But the thing is, though, I don't think it really is a difficult thing to do. I think it's just the mindset, is sort of doesn't line up good with the current society, and just how people need that instant gratification, And so if you're patient, and you're willing to take the time, it's actually not hard. You can go out, and once you know what it looks like, you can dig that up, and then setting your oven for 200 degrees and watching it for a couple of days is not really that big of a deal. But it is funny how people react to the fact that I use my oven that long. But it's
right.
It's nothing though, honestly. And so it's people. That's what I do for the tribe here. I'm a cultural education coordinator, so it is my job to be able to show people that it isn't all that it sounds like it really is something you can do in your everyday life, and it will enhance your life a lot and really connect you in ways you might not even know are possible or could happen with your culture and your ancestors.
Okay. And just before the break, you talked a little bit about how the tribe is working to create more access to camas for the community. But how has environmental changes, maybe even climate change, affected that access, or where and how the plant grows itself?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to that as much. We do have people that look at those kinds of factors, but just, from my perspective, which is going out and digging, it's doing better this year than I've seen in a long time. And so that's really great to see. And I know there's a lot of awareness, in the general public about camas being a traditional food, and I think that excites anybody, including non-native people. But, there's a lot of environmental factors such as pollution that we've been worried about over the years, maybe, from petrochemicals, pesticides, herbicides that large farms might be using in the runoff, and camas absorbing those potentially because they are a bulb, But the testing that we've been able to do has shown that, as far as I know, like, contamination's pretty low, depending on where you are in general. But there are certain places, like Superfund sites, that you have to look out for, or areas that maybe had some heavy, chemical usage or spills that had happened in the past. You definitely have to be you have to know where you're gathering. You have to know the land, which is why it's so exciting, to have our own field here finally in the community, right in the center of our little valley here. And I'm able to bring our preschool, our language immersion school classrooms out, and they dig, and you see just the effects that it has on people's mental health is amazing, because, we have kids that have a lot of special needs. There's a high rate of mental illness and disorders and stuff, and these kids have behavior issues. But we find when you go out and do these kinds of activities, anything traditional, cultural, whatever it may be, that all kids respond really good to it. And then you see those behaviors go away. You see that every kid there is on an equal footing, and that, like, it's good for everybody, including the teachers. And so not only that, but then, like, our cook at our school, he cooks for 120 kids every day. Mm-hmm. He's getting excited about camas, and now he's, like, looking at incorporating it into their food that they eat on a regular basis there. And so you just see how not only camas, but all of our traditional activities, gathering tea, basketry materials, whatever it may be, that everybody gets behind it, including our non-native staff and non-native community members, and that we support and encourage that kind of advocacy, because it's not just about us, not just about our culture, it's about the plants. It's about this way of life in general that we're trying to bring back, and we need all the support that we can get.
Awesome. All right. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Jordan, for joining the show and helping us learn about camas. I want to go over to our last topic here with another guest we have with us. We are going to be talking about the Indigenous food pyramid. It includes items like bison, salmon, elderberries, prickly pear, and pine nuts. And speaking of camas, it also includes camas. And it's by the Cultivating Culture, Indigenous Food Sovereignty and Language Project, which looks at how food and language is connected to tribal sovereignty. Joining us now from here in Albuquerque to help us talk about this project is Sean Griswold. He is a correspondent at High Country News and Native News Online. He's Laguna, Jemez, and Zuni Pueblo. Welcome to the menu, Sean.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So give us some more details about the Indigenous food pyramid. What other foods are included in it?
Okay, yes. Indigenous Food Pyramid, we created this through Cultivating Culture, which is, as you mentioned, our food and language section at Native News Online. It came in January when we saw the USDA and health leaders release the new U.S. Food Pyramid, which was this inverted triangle. And it was created with a digital food pyramid that identified just items of food. So as we looked at it, the first question was, okay, number one, is Indigenous food sovereignty going to still be considered a priority policy and a principle under the federal government? We asked health secretaries the day that it came out, where's the Indigenous food sovereignty spaces in here? We were told that Indigenous food sovereignty principles are in fact part of the new health guidelines. So then that led us to go to the place, well, okay, where are they? And we couldn't find them. We couldn't get an answer. So that's where we ended up having to do our own work. What I did here is I collaborated with an artist that is from here. It's based out of here in New Mexico. His name is Joseph Arno. He's Blackfeet. And we wanted to paint a canvas intentionally as well, too. Like we were even positioned to possibly create an image out of AI. We decided to reject that completely and focus on a human-made canvas that we developed. And I think it was important for Joseph and I wanted to talk with him because I know that while he's based here in the Southwest, he's from tribes in other regions, and I wanted to try and provide as much of a scope as we could. The goal here was not to ultimately present like the full-on Indigenous food pyramid. This is what it is. In fact, we acknowledge that in our reporting. So, we understand that it does not fully represent every tribal region or food source. We understand that the items need to be translated into traditional language because to us, this is the beginning of a conversation. We even identified in our reporting there could be a food pyramid for individual tribes or bands. Many are using food with language lessons, as we just heard from your prior guest, and there could be numerous versions of this food pyramid. But what we started here, we have 27 food sources, and all these do actually line up with some of the new federal standards when it comes to nutrition, as well as priorities for what should be grown agriculturally. So our 27 food sources that we identify here, we have buffalo, salmon, sheep, elk, acorn, lilac, pinyon, dandelion, wild rice, maple, milkweed, turkey, mint, wild licorice. We put a Kota Indian tea bundle, camas, lettuce, carrots, celery, red and green chili, blue corn, beans, acorn, squash, calabasitas, huckleberry, prickly pear, and turnip. Mm-hmm. And that's where we started. That's the plate that we're setting here. We know, obviously, that there's going to be very specific ones for some specific regions, and that's the next phase in our reporting. We're asking people, and we're already getting responses. What can we add? How can we identify and classify some of the food sources specific to a region and potentially even translate that into a language? So our first reporting, we identified two stories that are focused on the buffalo and how the impact for buffalo curriculum and field harvesting has been helping with student success on the Wind River Reservation. Student attendance records have more than doubled just from the some of it is being tied to the inclusion and creation of new buffalo curriculum for elementary, middle, and high school students on Wind River. Mm-hmm. And our next story is going to be looking at Pacific Northwest fish diet, because if we were to look at a food pyramid for salmon people, fish people, we were told that the majority of their diet, more than 50%, could be constituted of just fish. So that's going to be our first deep dive into a regional specific place. And we hope to kind of do that as much as possible. To us, this is a roadmap to how we can cover Indigenous food sovereignty in a way that I think your show demonstrates really well.
Right. And I was looking at the project online on Native News Online, and there are a lot of articles that are connected to this project, Cultivating Culture, and they're all connected to the land. They're all connected to, of course, food and different policies that impact food. How would you suggest one sort of navigate going through some of these articles on the website here?
Yeah, best thing, if you're at nativenewsonline.net, you can look up Cultivating Culture. You can email me directly, and I can happy to share my contact information. But we have a newsletter. We send it out twice a week with news items and articles that we've worked either with our own independent reporting or in collaboration with some of our publication partners. You mentioned High Country News. That's another space that's doing incredible work on this general topic. We've also partnered with places like ICT, as well as some of the state's newsroom organizations that's looking at it as from a policy perspective. So people can find it there. Just visit the website. You can see all the reporting. Even within the introduction for our Indigenous food pyramid, where you can see the image itself. The landing page has all of the articles that we published. We started this project last year, and when we published this about 10 days ago, we identified not only is this going to help us envision what we're doing in the future, but it's actually really tied to so much of the reporting we've been doing for a year. And that reporting includes interviews where we actually did interview the Health Human Services Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the Nez Perce reservations, where he did tell us last year on the record that he does fully support Indigenous food sovereignty. Now it's on us to kind of hold him to the fire as to what that is. Is that terms of supporting it with words, with policy, with funding? Sometimes just leaving it alone might be what some local communities are doing. So we have reporting on that. We have reporting on how food insecurity is also paramount to this. We've identified food baskets built for people with traditional food items in places like Zuni Pueblo and Wind River. And then one of the biggest things we're also following is this massive land management conflict that might be making it to the Supreme Court, with an issue of how the 5 civilized tribes in Oklahoma are trying to have, access their hunting rights. And it's creating some legal parameters over tribal sovereignty with the state of Oklahoma. And then, of course, the Native-owned restaurant spaces. There's so much positive spaces, like your first guest mentioned, where Native people are identifying food sources and food business practices as a way to heal through their own personal struggle or even community healing. So we have so much of that we're just going to continue to showcase and promote and show off, and just happy and excited to share more of it, too.
Right. And what do you hope this all adds up to?
I think a lot of it is when we started the project, the Indigenous food pyramid or Indigenous food sovereignty topic itself, when we walked into it, we recognized that there's an incredibly broad approach to this. And in fact, there's too many definitions, and not too many. There's multiple definitions, and each definition sometimes can conflict. So our goal here is ultimately to try and define some of these pathways, show where shared knowledge and shared understanding of these principles in food, how they're impacted by not only Indigenous and tribal lifeways, but how those are also tied directly to the overall impact and growth of what people are, how tribes and communities are growing themselves through self-determination and sovereignty. So it allows us to also identify that through some guardrails and also understand what's real and what's not real in terms of putting some scrutiny to places and people and programs and organizations that are saying they're doing Indigenous food sovereignty programs. Well, show us, what does that look like? And your show is another example as to how that can be done. So in a lot of ways, we're not really reinventing the wheel. We're just trying to do more of the quality and good reporting that's already out there and provide some quality, accountable journalism to it. I think that's the thing that I think this space could really use is quality journalists, and also food writing is something that is just speaks to a lot of people. And so this is another great way to express and show what community and what tribal nations are doing.
All right. Well, we're going to be winding down the hour here in just a couple moments, but what are you working on a food story right now to add to the project?
So one of the things that we're immediately coming out of this and in our introduction to this story is that the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program identified several foods that added new staple foods. And staple foods are the ones that people can use to purchase, that they can use their SNAP benefits to purchase. Staple foods are also identified by the USDA as what's important for agricultural policies and principles. You're talking agricultural scale growth. And so some of the items that were now approved on this include traditional foods. It is now in the Federal Register that the USDA says traditional foods are important to a nutritional health value. And they identify some of those as bison, salmon, blue corn, and cherries. Now, there's also a line there that then does allow for regional and tribal spaces to then request more traditional foods to be added to these staple foods lists. So our reporting now is going to be like, well, what's that process? What are those staple foods? And how can tribes, what can they do to ensure that their regional space also reaches into this spot where not only does it have full tribal and community support, but now it's also reaching at a place where the federal government is now going to offer it some protections, possible investments, and I think wove this all back in the fabric of tribal sovereignty.
All right. Thank you, Sean, for joining the show. I also want to say thank you to our other guests we heard from, CJ Bernal and Jordan Mercier.
The faculty of tribal colleges and universities support their students in countless ways. They say I believe and offer help before it's asked.
Hear that? That's everything tribal college faculty do for their students on Fast Forward. Because if one tried to say it in real time, they'd be here all day. They teach, guide, comfort, and connect. And for that, the community is grateful. Learn more at mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
They give extensions, cheer progress, share laughter, create calm, and allow reflection. They inspire hope, share wisdom, guide gently, validate feelings.
Grand Canyon Conservancy fosters visitor engagement with the landscape through learning, discovery, and stewardship. The Grand Canyon Conservancy Field Institute provides immersive and educational adventures designed in partnership with Grand Canyon National Park, including day hikes for the family, once-in-a-lifetime backpacking trips, and art classes with expert instructors. More at grandcanyon.org. Grand Canyon Conservancy supports this show.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.